Hello, how you doing? Okay, so I once read somewhere, I like to study psychology, human psychology and stuff. I once read somewhere that there's a lot of aspects to communicating your message that people in general can't, they're not going to have the right kind of like respect to really hear what you're saying unless they have some kind of like background, like if all of a sudden some stranger's talking to you about being an alcoholic all of a sudden, and you don't know that they are an alcoholic, it makes a difference to know that they're an alcoholic. It matters in hearing their message. They would have been better off to tell you at the beginning they're an alcoholic and then tell you their story. So it's kind of like that. So that's kind of what this is about. Is a little background on me. First of all, I'm an alcoholic, but that's not really the main thing. So I'll try to make it quick. Just this is I'll do kind of like two things. One with since I'll talk a lot about the Bible and things like that. I'll do my background as far as religion and spirituality and stuff, and then this one's going to be more just about like just my like life story background. So I was born in the early 70s in southern Utah. So northern Utah is like where the mountains are and that you would think of when you think of mountains and the ski resorts and all that. And most of what you heard of from Utah is in northern Utah. The southern Utah is like a desert, and like the sand's red, and there's like sagebrush. There's mountains, but they're different mountains. They're like deserty mountains. So I grew up in those kind of mountains. I was born kind of more like southeastern, and then I moved to like south central Utah, around that area. And then all the way up to kindergarten that I lived in those places. My dad was a football player when I was born in college, and he went to he was in the Air Force during the Vietnam War, but he was a surveyor, so he was in Germany surveying radar. So he got out of having to fight, and he went to Hill Air Force Base in Utah and met my mom, who was also in Ogden. Hill Air Force Base is in Ogden, Utah. My mom is from Wyoming. My dad's he grew up most of his life in upstate New York. He was born in Massachusetts, and that side of the family is from Massachusetts. He was born in Salem, Massachusetts, and we're descendants of John Proctor, if you've ever seen The Crucible, and have been in Massachusetts since the Mayflower. And if you've ever seen Memphis Belle, my biological grandpa was one of those people that dropped bombs, the most dangerous job in World War II. He was one of the ones that survived. He came home from the war and married my grandma and got her pregnant, and then hit the road, kind of a thing. My dad never knew his biological father, and that was in Massachusetts, both of them being from Massachusetts. And that's the Morrison side of my family. So you'll hear me talk about my interest in Druids and Celtic and that. That's like a red-headed. We left on a boat from Ireland, but most Morrisons are Scottish, but some are Irish. So we're either Irish or Scottish. I don't know, but and Kittredge is on the other side of the family, I think. So it's just like super Irish Scottish on that side. But my dad never knew him. That's why my sister is a redhead, and half of my life ago, I've been dyeing my hair almost my whole life. I've been dyeing my hair black, but back when I was a child, it was like a reddish brown, and the younger you go, like a reddish blonde, color. And so are my sisters. One sister is redheaded all the way into adulthood. So that's where all that comes from, all the freckles. Can you see the freckles on my shoulders? I don't know if you can see that, but when you see the freckles and things like that, that's because of that. But the he didn't know that side of the family. So my grandma moved in with her mom in Salem, Massachusetts, and that's why my dad was born in Salem, Massachusetts. So the family's from Massachusetts, Salem, Massachusetts. And well, the Ducharme side of my family, my last name is Ducharme. I changed my name from Morrison to Ducharme at one point. Because that's my grandma, we didn't know that side of the family. My grandma moved in with her mom, whose maiden name is Ducharme. The Osborne, her married name is Osborne. That's the side that's been there since the Mayflower, that's related to John Proctor. The Ducharme side of my family, I'm only a third generation American on that side. Ducharme is French Canadian, so that's why you'll hear me have interest in French things, and French Canadian things and that. I love French things and stuff. I want to learn French. I want to learn to speak French. I already speak Spanish, so that's very realistic. But so my dad, eventually my grandma met a man from New York and married him and moved the family when my dad was really young. He was like a first grader, second grader, something like that. They moved to upstate New York, and my dad lived all the rest of his childhood in upstate New York. So if you met my dad today, you'd say, I'm from upstate New York, but really the family's from Massachusetts. So my dad moved, he joined the Air Force from upstate New York and went to Ogden, Utah, Hill Air Force Base. And my mom, is from Wyoming. Her side of the family is Mormon pioneers and Mormon. Before Mormon, they were English, so it's an English people. That side of the family were from the Fort Bridger area, some of the first white people to homestead, and that's like southwestern Wyoming. If you've ever been to the Fort Bridger Mountain Man Rendezvous, we homesteaded in a place right next to there. So she was in Ogden for beauty school. Her brother started a cabinet business, Fieldcrest Cabinets, here in Ogden. And she moved, and there was a beauty school here, so she moved to Ogden, and they started dating here in Ogden, and then decided to get married, and that was the same time my dad was going to get transferred to Germany. So they got married in Germany and lived in Germany, and then as soon as he was done with Germany, came back to Utah. And my dad went on the GI Bill. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, the GI Bill to go to college, and that's when that's where I was born, in southeastern Utah. My dad was going to Snow College, and was on the college football team, studying to be a surveyor because he'd already had some background in the military surveying, and with the GI Bill he studied business, and he got a bachelor's degree in business, and then started his own surveying company. So my dad grew up surveying. I grew up helping my dad survey. Back in the day, you'd see those people with like the prisms, and I'd like hold the measure thing or the prism. The measure thing's called a chain, or the prism, or just like nailing the stakes in the ground. A mink just ran by. Look, a mink. Can you see it? A mink. There are minks in Utah. Can you see it? Isn't that a tree, you guys? Thank you, Mother Nature. That was really sweet. It just ran right. If I would have known, I could have reached over this way and grabbed it. It ran right past me and right over there. Oh, how sweet. That's a privilege. That's a huge privilege. I can't believe that I would be that lucky to be trusted by a mink to run that close to me. That's pretty special, really. Wow, that was exciting. I didn't know I was gonna be like within arm's distance of a wild mink. So yeah, I'm in northern Utah. There's minks in northern Utah. Okay, anyway, so that's my genetic background. English on my mom's side. On my mom's side, the side that converted Mormon, they're English, but they lived in India for 300 years in the English Army. But if you see pictures, I'll put some pictures on here of what that side of my family looks like. It's completely obvious that side of my family, at one point somebody made a baby with a local because they've got like brown skin. My grandpa had brown skin, And look at my hair, like I'm in my mid 50s, and I just like few people have that much hair. You know, yes, I was born a boy, I'm transgender, but some trans women are balding, you know. They're not as lucky, I guess, in that case as me. We all have advantages. There's disadvantages to me and being me too, and advantages. One of them is that I've got a real thick, that's how I have these dreadlocks and everything. I don't have, your hair gene comes from your mom's dad, and that's the side of me from India. So I don't really have white people hair. So that's both my genetic background and where I was born. I describe myself as not really being from anywhere. I moved every 3 to 5 years, so average every 3 years, my entire childhood and even most of my adult life. I never stayed in one place more than 3 years. My record was 5 years until I moved here to Ogden, Utah. I moved here to Ogden, Utah in the end of 1997, something like that, or I guess it might have been the summer of 97. Maybe it was 98. It probably was 98. No, it was probably 97. I don't know. I think it was 97. And then we got married, and then she had a baby, and then soon after that, she left me for someone else, and then I raised my son as a single parent, and so that's why I've been living in Ogden now for, well, he's 24, so for like going on 26 years I've lived here in Ogden, which is by far the longest. Before that, my record was 5 years, and my average was 3 years, so I'm not really from anywhere. So I've lived all over Utah. I've lived in Montana. I've lived in New Mexico, and all through my childhood I'd go back to work on my grandpa's ranch in Wyoming. He had a dairy farm, and I always loved animals. I loved horses. My grandpa made me a dresser with horse hooves and stuff, and he'd let me catch and saddle my own horse. So I've known how to ride a horse since I was very young. I don't even barely remember. It doesn't seem like I ever really, someone must have taught me. It just seems like I've always known how to ride horses, and I remember at one point he taught me. I knew how to ride horses before I knew how to saddle them, but it was still really young. I basically have always known how to ride horses. I just realized I should check to make sure that otter didn't take my socks. See, can you see my feet? Yeah, I'm like right on the riverside, sticking my feet in the river. It's a hot summer day. But my teenage years, I lived in Southern California. I lived up in Canada for a little bit, and I lived in Spain for over 2 years. That's why I speak Spanish. And most of my adult life, my family lived in Saudi Arabia, so I've been to Saudi Arabia 5 times. That's real fun. And so my dad would pick flights. I grew up with I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and the youngest was when I moved out of the house, he was only 4 years old. 3 sisters, and the youngest was a boy, but he was 4 years old when I moved out of the house. Then they moved to Saudi Arabia, and he grew up in Saudi Arabia. And so I haven't been around him as much, you know, so that's why you'll hear me when I talk about growing up, I talk about me and my sisters. Because, you know, to me, my son was a baby, and then he moved to Saudi Arabia, and I just saw him very few times and things like that. Right now he lives in, I think, Vietnam. He's even taller than me. I'm 6'3", so I'm really tall. He's like 6'5" or 6'7". I don't know how tall he is. He's really tall. My one sister's 6 foot. We're a really tall family. The redhead's is 6 foot. But yeah, I love living in California. You know, dude, what do you talk about, bro? You know, like the whole stoner of the 80s and the saying dude all the time. That was there. When people do that, they're making fun of me and my friends, Southern California stoners. You know, I was a teenager and a rocker. We called ourselves rockers. We went to the beach all the time, or skateboarded, and you know, that was living in California really defined me. You know, like I've lived in Ogden longer, but you know, my thinking and my opinions and you know, like just like how I handle things, like four-way stop signs. Here they're like, oh, no, you go, no, you go, no, you go, no, you go. You tell me one time, no, you go, I'm gone. I already went, you know? Things like that. I describe myself as from California, but I guess it's mostly true that I'm not really from anywhere. A big thing is, well, let's see, I'm trying to stay out of the theology thing. So, something else to know, I've lived the life of a street person. Like I said, most of my adult life, my family lived in Saudi Arabia. So for a while, a very short while, I was homeless. My parents were rich, they lived in Saudi Arabia, so my dad wouldn't let me be homeless. You know, all my friends were homeless, and I would hang out with homeless people all the time. And I always had a job. I've had a job since I was 12 years old, so even when I was homeless, I had an apartment. My dad would pay some of the rent when I couldn't pay rent, but I always had a job, and I always had a vehicle or rode the bus, and I've had a job since I was 12 years old. I've always had a job, but I still, I was homeless for just like half a year, I don't know, not very long, and at that time I didn't have a job, but it's kind of confusing because like my friends were like heroin addicts and homeless people and prostitutes, and till this day I still say hi to all the homeless people. They don't get it, you know. But there was a time when I was smoking crack. My best friend was a gangsta, you know, and if I brought a bottle of tequila over, he would smoke me out with crack, and we'd drink tequila and smoke crack. And when I wasn't hanging out with him, I was hanging out with my other friend, and I was slamming heroin, and that was a long time ago. That was like 1996, 97. You know, just before I met who I would marry. When I met my now ex and the mother of my child, then I was just an alcoholic and a stoner. I didn't really like crack, you know. I mean, I liked it, but if you're going to use any kind of tweak, I think crack is the most fun one. I don't want to give anybody any ideas, because it's a horrible life, because your teeth grind and you don't go to sleep and your muscles are sore from your teeth grinding. See, these are my real teeth. It was just a short while, you know. I was into that for a couple of years, not very long, but I was also really depressed, and I was a cutter, so that's like I have this big tattoo on my arm, which you'll hear me talk about. I love that tattoo, but one of the reasons I got that tattoo is because I got a razor blade and carved F-U-C-K in my arm, and I'm like, oh shit. I was really drunk, and I was like, crap, now I have to live the rest of my life with fuck tattooed on or carved into my forearm. So I got a big tattoo and covered it up. But yeah, and then heroin, I felt it was disappointing. My opinion about drugs is that all you really need is cannabis and mushrooms. They're natural. People have been eating psychedelic mushrooms and smoking cannabis since the beginning of time. You know, right now I don't smoke cannabis and I don't eat mushrooms. I'm kind of more of a no drugs kind of a person. I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't drink alcohol. I got cirrhosis and didn't beat it. I brought my liver back to normal liver functioning. All those years of smoking cigarettes and being an alcoholic, I have more of a history. I was the high school drunk. I would go to school drunk. I'd buy those apple juice things, and I'd drink the apple juice and replace it with whiskey because it looks the same, and drink one of those at lunch. And by the time I was back in class again after lunch, I was just wasted. But I would never get in trouble because it was just kind of expected. It was it was just me, you know, and just all those years, you know. But raising my son though, I'd you know, open my third beer when I'd put him to bed at 10 p.m. You know, it was 9 p.m. for a while, then when he got older, 10 p.m. And, you know, I was real strict about the bedtime because, you know, I was anxious to get back to drinking, and he'd go to bed and I'd crack open the third beer, because that's right, I wouldn't really get a buzz till the third beer, you know. And so my son has seen me drunk, but it really affected my parenting very little. I quit smoking cigarettes cold turkey when he was born. I didn't want to be a cigarette smoking parent. I took parenting. There's a shoe floating down the river. You see it? um, I took raising my son very seriously. I still do. It seems like that's what I've done with a lot of my parenthood or my adulthood is being a parent. I've always took that very seriously. I love my son a lot, but I'm a loner very much. Back when I was married, we'd get jobs, work in the same place, and spend a lot of time together. And I've always either just been single and no dates, or engaged or married. When it's hot, it's hot. When it's cold, kind of thing. But I transitioned female when I was like 40, and I'm now 52. Like 40, I realized I was transgender. I went on hormones probably like about 51. 40, and then 41. So I've been on female hormones and been living full time out of the closet transgender for going on 10 years now. So, and my son's 24, so he was like in junior high. Even before that, I was a loner. I've just always been a loner. When I was a young child, I said the mountains of southern Utah, I wouldn't hang out with people. I didn't even really start doing the have a friend thing till I was like in 4th grade. Before 4th grade, I had people I called my friends, but I'd see them very little. I spent most of my time alone in the mountains. I've always loved animals. I wanted to be a wildlife photographer as a kid. I'd always carry my camera on my side, and I spent all my time alone in the mountains. Or like for dinner, if we had meat, I'd save the bones and hurry and take them out to my dog house with my dog. I'd go inside the dog house and we both sit there and chew the marrow out of the bones. Or I'd hang out with my cat. The cat would jump up on a fence and I wouldn't jump on the fence because I'm too big, but it would eat a grasshopper, so I'd catch a grasshopper and eat the grasshopper, and I'd walk around like a cat or a dog. And I was much closer to animals than I was humans, except my mom. I'd do all my talking with my mom, and she would like do her nails or sew or work in the kitchen. And she'd watch like I Dream of Jeannie or Bewitched and do her nails and stuff. And I was kind of like a mother's little helper, I'd like help my mom babysit the kids. So I've been babysitting kids and for helping my mom run the house, kind of a kid, So I did lots of talking with her. My grandma came, being the one from Salem, Massachusetts, came to visit us from upstate New York once when I was a kid, and she's like, "Oh, this is your kitchen? You don't even have a kitchen witch?" And so she sent us back a kitchen witch, which is like a doll that's a witch, and you hang it in the corner of your kitchen, and she blesses your food. And I was just, no one else even, I've talked to my mom and my sisters, and everybody's all, "What, a kitchen? What are you talking?" Nobody else even remembers, but I just love that. I love the wonderful world of Disney, and I always wanted to be a witch from the time I was really young, and I would just stare at the kitchen witch, and I can still remember every detail. She had like a white shirt with a black dress, and like a witch's hat with like a long nose, looked like a cartoon witch looking thing, like I remember once I got a witch and went a broom in my backyard, and when no one was looking, I really thought I was gonna fly, and I jumped up and I didn't fly. I just fell on the ground. I was like, wow, I really thought I was getting it, but I didn't. And I hated how people would be, when you're in the mountains, they're like, "Oh, Mother Nature, and this is nature, and Mother," and then you come back to the city and they're all, "Mother Nature, don't say that, that's satanic." My family's Mormon. My dad converted Mormon to marry my mom. And I never was really interested in the church. My mom would give me a free Pop-Tart. If on Sundays, if I'd go to church, she'd give me a free Pop-Tart with my breakfast. And then when I was a teenager, she'd let me drive the car to school if I would go to church and do Mormon things. But I wouldn't tell my friends I was Mormon, and I wasn't really a Mormon type of kid. I did convert Mormon at the very end of my senior year in high school, and was this big conversion story. I was like given firesides, and and everything. And that's why I went on a Mormon mission to Spain. That's why I was living in Spain. I was Mormon for 4 years, 2 of which I was a missionary, a year before and a year after. And then I left the church, not on bitter terms. It was just a stepping stone. I'll go into that more with my background with religion and that. But today I would describe myself as a witch. I was right as a kid. As a kid, I would be so bothered by how people would be like all, like, just like you go to the city and everything's all shiny and made out of metal and everything. I'm like, oh, why don't we live in trees? And like, why do we cut trees down to make houses? I didn't understand. I still don't. I'm like, oh, why don't we just spread out and love the land and leave it how it is and live in tents? And like, I don't get the whole cities and like cutting down trees to make houses and like, why would you do that? I don't get that, So I sold my soul to the devil when I was about 7 years old. My family said, you need time to decide if you want to baptize yourself Mormon or not. That's what they do in the Mormon church when you're 8. No, I guess I would have been 8 years old then. And I said, okay, and I got baptized Mormon, but then secretly behind their back, I sold my soul to the devil. Now I know. I mean, I didn't even know who Legba was. I didn't know there was a right and wrong way to do it and everything. I just said a prayer, Satan, I don't want to be a part of this whole society thing. I want to be one with nature. Of course, you just see that otter go by. Sometimes I'm like, oh, wow, like animals don't see me as a regular human, and I'm much closer to nature than most people. So sometimes I'm like, oh man, I hope that didn't work. But I kind of like the Ghost Rider story, where he's like, doing all this I can relate with that. How he reads all those books and studies it. I'm like, no, I was young. I didn't know what I was doing, and that's just like that. It couldn't be that simple. I just don't believe that I sold my soul to the devil, So that's kind of like my life goal right now. I'm done raising my son. He moved out, and I'm trying to get my feet back on the ground. And I want to be an angel. I want to get a truck and drive around America and kind of like Highway to Heaven. I want to be an angel and just feed the homeless, clothe the naked, and that kind of a thing. I'm really close to Mother Mary. I'm a witch, so I'm not a Christian. I just use the beautiful artwork and everything of Mother Mary to represent my archetype of Mother Nature. And so, with the whole Mary and Jesus thing, if I use that as my example of patience and love and how to treat people, but I'm no Christian. You'll see. I don't want to go into religion and that, because what I'm trying to do here in this video is talk about all the non-religious things, like my background and a little bit about me and things like that. I think that's enough. I was a hardcore rocker in high school. As soon as I heard in 1984, when I heard I used to get bullied a lot. Between 4th and 6th grade, I used to get beat up every day. Like whole groups of boys. I was in special ed, but they couldn't figure out why I should be in special ed. They ran all these tests, but me and my friend, who were both in special ed, they'd always beat us up and everything. So I started pretending like I was Rocky. I'd drink raw eggs in the morning, and I'd start jogging and that, and then I could outrun them, and I'd run away from them, and then I'd start thinking and believing that I was Rocky, and I was always a foot taller than anyone my age. I was always gigantic. And so if you're a gigantic person that thinks they're Rocky, that game over. Nobody's going to beat up a person like that. And then right about then, I went into junior high and heard the Van Halen 1984 album, and that was it. The Van Halen 1984 changed my life. I became a rocker. Dreamed to spend from junior high till even now. I still make music. I've got 5 albums. They're just in like rough draft form, hoping to get recording equipment one day, but that was a big deal, like once I became a rocker, then I had rocker friends, and then I was, before my friend that I used to get beat up with, I was a loner, and then I met him, and then I'd get beat up. So it wasn't really till junior high that I started having a social life and meeting people and things like that, and that was because of Van Halen. I was the ultimate. Everybody loved Van Halen in the 80s, but I was always the biggest Van Halen fan. I loved David Lee Roth. I loved Eddie Van Halen. I loved Alex Van Halen. I loved Michael Anthony. I'd go to parties with a bottle of Jack Daniels and drink half of the bottle in one setting, like Michael Anthony, and so that's something more to know about me. I've always been a big drinker. My sister died 2 days after my son was born when she was only 19. She had a blood disease, and my mom, like I said, I was my mom's little helper. So my mom was would do beauty pageants, and so she was into like beauty and that, so she's always on a diet. But then when my sister got that blood disease, she started getting into Chinese herbs and natural medications, and so I have a huge history in herbal medications and things like that, and natural remedies and diets. I've studied hundreds of diets. I'm not kidding. And I've been on a diet my whole life, but I was also an alcoholic, so I was kind of, at times I was, like when I was doing the heroin, crack cocaine thing, I lived on cigarettes and coffee and poppy muffins, and I was just like, there were times in my life when I didn't live right, but mostly that's why I beat diabetes. That's why I've brought my liver back to normal liver functioning, because dieting and exercising and fitness is what I can do. I have my own workout that I have on my other YouTube channel, Angie's, the Spiral Times channel. But yeah, I started my son at dreadlocks with birth, and I've been in it. This is the 5th time I've had dreadlocks. So a lot of my life I've had dreadlocks, and so that's kind of it. That's kind of my background and who I am, where I'm from, what my main hobbies are and interests and things like that. I'm a Taurus Gemini cusp, moon in Pisces, Sagittarius ascendant, and I love people.